She gave them everything: a daughter's innocence, a wife's devotion, a mother's hope. But what they gave her in return was silence, shame, and betrayal. In the early months of 2023, in a quiet corner of Muzaffarnagar, Uttar Pradesh, a young woman, only 23 years old and several months pregnant, stepped into what she believed would be the safest place in the world: her husband's family home. Her name has not been made public, and perhaps that's for the best. Because what happened to her is not just her story. It's a story of too many women across the world whose pain is buried under honor, silence, and control. She had been married for less than a year, raised in a modest home where tradition ruled every conversation and sacrifice was second nature for daughters. She entered the marriage with quiet hopes. Maybe this house would bring stability. Maybe her husband would be kind. Maybe her child, growing slowly inside her, would be born into peace. These were the thoughts that anchored her during long days of housework and longer nights of isolation. Like many young brides in rural India, she moved in with her husband's extended family. The house was small but structured, its hierarchy firmly in place. At the top sat her father-in-law, a man decades older and deeply respected by neighbors. Her husband was often away working. That left her in the company of her in-laws, performing household chores, serving meals, and enduring long stretches of silence and solitude. Still, she adjusted. She obeyed. She served. Because in Indian households, especially in conservative towns like Muzaffarnagar, being a good daughter-in-law isn't just expected, it's demanded. And to be pregnant? That elevated her responsibility tenfold. She wasn't just carrying a child. She was carrying the family's future. But no one warned her that in that same house, behind locked doors and drawn curtains, the very people she trusted might be the ones to strip away her dignity. She thought she had come home. She had no idea she had just walked into a nightmare. In the small, crowded household in Muzaffarnagar, the rules weren't written, but everyone knew them. At the top of this quiet hierarchy stood the father-in-law. He was an older man, well regarded in the neighborhood, a familiar face in the community mosque, and often seen offering advice in village matters. To the outside world, he was respectable. To those inside the home, he was untouchable. The young woman, just 23 years old and pregnant, had learned this quickly after her marriage. With her husband frequently away for work, it wasn't him she saw most often. It was her father-in-law. He decided who did what in the house, what could be said, and when. Even mealtimes revolved around his schedule. No one questioned him, not his sons, not his wife, and certainly not the newest member of the household. In the traditional male-dominated structure of many joint families, men like him didn't need to shout. Their authority seeped into the air, into the gestures that silenced conversation, into the narrowed eyes that discouraged questions. To disobey, even in thought, was a kind of rebellion, and rebellion had no place in a house built on obedience. The young woman followed the rules as best she could. She rose early to sweep the floors and cook for the family. She kept her voice down, her eyes lowered. She never left the house alone. Her pregnancy added to the expectations placed upon her. She was not just a wife now, but the future bearer of a family legacy. Everything about her life was supposed to be sacred. But behind closed doors, that sanctity was shattered. There were moments, brief, uncomfortable, that began to signal something was wrong. A stare that lingered too long. An excuse to be alone with her. A voice too soft, too close. At first, she convinced herself she was imagining it. She had to be. After all, he was her father-in-law. He was supposed to protect her, not. She couldn't finish the thought. She wouldn't let herself. Not yet. But the truth was already making itself known. And it was only a matter of time before it came crashing down. It wasn't the sound of footsteps that frightened her. It was the silence, the thick, heavy silence that followed, just before everything changed. It was a day like any other in Muzaffarnagar, sometime in the middle of 2023. The sun hung low and unforgiving, the streets were quieter than usual, and in the family home, the young pregnant woman found herself completely alone. Her mother-in-law had gone to visit a relative, and her husband was, as usual, away for work. The house was empty, except for her and her father-in-law. She had spent the morning, as she always did, sweeping, preparing the afternoon meal, washing clothes by hand. Her pregnancy made every chore harder, but she pushed through with silent determination. These were her duties. She was taught to endure. By early afternoon, she was resting, sitting on the floor in the shaded corner of the room, when she heard the door close with a soft click. She didn't flinch. Why would she? It was only her father-in-law, the man who led prayers in the house, the man others greeted with respect in the streets. But something was different this time. He didn't go to his room. He didn't ask for food or tea. Instead, he stood in the doorway, watching her. She offered a polite smile and began to rise to her feet. That's when he stepped closer, too close, and closed the door behind him. What happened next would forever fracture her understanding of safety, of family, of faith. He spoke softly at first, words she didn't fully hear. Then his hands were on her shoulders, holding her down. Her protests, quiet and stunned, were ignored. Her strength was no match for his grip. She tried to escape, to reason, to plead, but there was no one else home. No one to hear her scream. No one to stop him. In that moment, the walls that once felt like a home became a prison. Every object around her, her folded clothes, her wedding bangles, the dishes she had just cleaned, bore witness to a cruelty she never imagined possible. When it was over, he walked out without a word, as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't just torn apart her body and spirit in a single harrowing act. She lay still for a long time, her hand instinctively resting on her pregnant belly. And for the first time since entering that house, she no longer felt like a daughter-in-law. She felt like a prisoner. And the house she once hoped would protect her now held her deepest shame. She turned to the one person she trusted most, her husband, for comfort. But instead of protection, she found cold betrayal. The day after the nightmare, trembling and broken, the young woman found the courage to speak the truth. She sought her husband, the man she had married, the father of her unborn child, the one who should have been her shield against the darkness. She told him everything. Her voice cracked as she recounted the horror. She expected tears. She expected anger. She expected a promise that he would stand by her, fight for her, protect her. But what came was far worse. He listened, silent at first, his face unreadable. Then, in a voice colder than the stone walls around them, he said something she would never forget, that since his father had established a relationship with her, they could no longer live together. No comfort. No justice. No hope. His words were like a verdict. She was no longer his wife, no longer a part of the family. She was tainted, marked by the unforgivable sin of her father-in-law's crime. Her husband's rejection was not just a personal betrayal. It was a cruel echo of the cultural stigma that punishes victims, not perpetrators. In that moment, she felt utterly alone. Her husband, the man she had trusted with her heart and future, turned his back on her. The very person who should have been her refuge became the source of her deepest pain. She was cast aside, not for what she had done, but for what had been done to her. And the house, once filled with hopes for a new life, became a place where she was abandoned, broken, isolated, and shamed. Her fight was just beginning, but now it was a fight she would face without the one person she needed most. After the devastating betrayal by her husband, the young woman found herself trapped in a suffocating silence. The weight of shame pressed down on her like a stone, and the cultural stigma that clings to victims of sexual violence in many parts of rural India loomed large. To speak out meant risking everything: her reputation, her safety, even the fragile life growing inside her. Family members whispered behind closed doors. Neighbors cast wary glances. The fear of retaliation was real and relentless. In communities where honor is prized above all, victims often become the accused, blamed for the violence done to them. Her world grew smaller, defined by doubt and despair. But beneath the fear, something stronger stirred, a fierce determination. She was not just fighting for herself. She was fighting for her unborn child, for the right to live without fear, for the hope that justice could still mean something. With trembling hands and a steady heart, she made the impossible choice to break the silence. She filed a police complaint against her father-in-law and, heartbreakingly, also named her husband for abandoning her. This act of courage sent shockwaves through her family and community. She was no longer just a daughter-in-law. She was a woman demanding justice in a system that often turned its back on victims like her. Her decision was met with hostility and disbelief by many, but it also sparked conversations that had long been suppressed. The legal battle ahead would be difficult, and the path uncertain. But in choosing to speak out, she reclaimed her voice and challenged the silence that had protected her abuser for far too long. Her fight was no longer private. It had become a battle for dignity, truth, and survival. After weeks of torment and inner turmoil, the young woman's brave decision to seek justice led to the filing of a first information report (FR) at the local police station in Muzaffarnagar. This legal step marked the beginning of a difficult and painful journey, one fraught with both hope and resistance. The police response was swift, though cautious. Authorities registered the complaint against her father-in-law on charges of rape and sexual assault, and also against her husband for abandonment and cruelty. While the law was clear, the social realities made enforcement complicated. Within days, the story spread beyond the walls of the family home. Neighbors, once silent, began to whisper. Some expressed sympathy for the victim, quietly condemning the heinous act. Others, steeped in the traditional mindset of patriarchal honor, sided with the family, questioning the woman's character and motives. The household that had seemed so normal now became a focal point of public scrutiny and gossip. Local media outlets picked up the story, highlighting the disturbing pattern of abuse hidden behind the facade of family respectability. The case ignited fierce debates on social platforms and community forums, forcing many to confront the toxic dynamics that allow such crimes to persist. Central to these discussions was the role of patriarchy and family honor, concepts deeply entrenched in rural India. Victims like her are often blamed and silenced to protect the family's name, while perpetrators escape accountability. The pressure to maintain appearances frequently traps women in cycles of abuse and shame. Her complaint challenged this status quo. By breaking the silence, she not only demanded justice for herself, but also exposed the broader cultural failure to protect vulnerable women. As the legal process unfolded, the young woman found herself at the eye of a storm, facing hostility, isolation, but also solidarity from activists and those calling for change. The battle ahead would test her courage, resilience, and resolve like never before. From the moment the first information report was filed, the young woman stepped into a legal labyrinth that tested every ounce of her strength. The police began investigations, but entrenched social biases slowed the wheels of justice. Her case was met with skepticism and at times outright hostility, from some officials who questioned her credibility to community members who viewed her as a troublemaker. Court hearings were often delayed. The legal jargon and procedures were confusing, and she frequently found herself isolated in a system that felt cold and indifferent. The stigma attached to victims of sexual violence in her region made it difficult for her to access support. Friends and relatives distanced themselves, fearing backlash or scandal. Yet, amid the broken machinery of justice and the harsh glare of public scrutiny, she remained unyielding. She became more than a victim. She became a symbol of resilience. Each time she walked into the courtroom, she carried not only her own pain, but also the hopes of countless women silenced by fear and tradition. Her resolve inspired a small but growing circle of activists, lawyers, and neighbors who rallied to her side, offering legal aid, emotional support, and a voice when hers was threatened to be drowned out. Despite the setbacks, delays, and emotional toll, she refused to be buried beneath her trauma. She fought to reclaim her dignity, to assert her truth, and to demand the justice she deserved, not just for herself, but for all women trapped in similar cycles of abuse and silence. Her journey through the legal system was far from over, but her will was unbroken. And in her courage, she forged a path toward hope, a powerful testament that even in the darkest places, strength can shine through. This case, raw and painful, has sent ripples far beyond the walls of a single household in Muzaffarnagar. It shines a harsh light on the dark corners where abuse hides, often behind locked doors and veiled by family loyalty. For too long, survivors have been silenced, dismissed, or blamed, especially when the betrayal comes from within the family itself. Her courage to stand up, to speak out against her father-in-law, and to confront the emotional abandonment by her husband challenges deep-rooted norms that protect perpetrators instead of victims. It sparks urgent conversations about accountability, respect, and the need to rewrite what justice means in contexts where family honor often outweighs human dignity. While the legal process may still be unfolding, her voice alone is a beacon of hope, proof that change is possible when survivors are believed and supported. This case could be the beginning of a shift in how society treats victims of domestic and sexual abuse, especially in patriarchal settings where power is concentrated and voices are often muffled. Her story reminds us that justice isn't just about punishment. It's about recognition, healing, and restoring humanity to those who have been wronged. It calls on all of us to listen more deeply, to trust survivors, and to dismantle the systems that enable such abuse to continue unchecked. Her fight is far from over, but her bravery lights the path forward. Each story like hers chips away at the silence and shame that have allowed abuse to thrive. By standing with survivors, by demanding justice, and by refusing to look away, we can help build a safer world for all women. If this story moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. There are many voices still waiting to be heard, and your support helps bring these stories to light. Together, we can keep the conversation alive and drive real change.